Welcome to Misbehaving in Maine. I'm Mindy Williams, and it's time to interview Dan. And now here goes everything. So, Dan, can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself?
Um, yeah, sure. I don't know what to say. Don't like this at all. This
No.
sucks. Be yeah. All right. Be specific. What do you want to know, Mindy?
Where did you get your love of story? Anybody specific inspire you?
I think my family. The main people. It's a family of storytellers, and I always think of my Grandpa Fred, and then but also my dad. They just have the um, they just have the ability to tell a story so well that you don't want it to stop. And I think that's my role when I go home. I don't want to tell stories because they're just so much better than me. So I just want to prompt them, and I just want to steer them away from conversations about hot water heaters and carburetors and get them telling stories about the weird things that have happened to them. So if I can get that going and get the story circle um, happening, then that's all I want to do. I'm very happy if that happens. So grandpa, dad, check.
Do you have a favorite grandpa story that he's told?
Um, so one time, well, grandpa was a farmer, a sort of a farmer, sort of a big rig truck driver, sort of a pastor. He also built houses, was a blueberry crew boss. Um, anyway, so he had a few sheep, and he looked out the back window, and one of the sheep was having trouble. It was just looked like it was coughing, and he ran out to the sheep, and it wasn't coughing, it was choking. And so he grabbed it, he picked it up and gave it the Heimlich maneuver and just squeezed it violently 3 or 4 times until an apple shot out of its throat and out of its mouth. And then he put the sheep down, and it was dead. And and I've told that story before, and you get mixed reactions because Grandpa tells it better than I do. But it's funny just to think of the sheep becoming like an apple gun and then dying when Grandpa was really trying to save its life. Is I cherish that story.
Well, you're.
Yep.
Yep. Well, I would say being around you guys, there's like a darkness to your humor, so that follows.
Love dark humor. It's the best.
Do you think that comes from Maine? Is that like a Maine characteristic, the dark humor?
I always thought so. I just thought that a place that's trying to kill you for half the year with freezing winter, it just sort of works death into your imagination, and so that also kind of filters down into your humor too. And so just gallows humor, I guess. If you are facing death, then one way to survive it or survive its passage as passing by you is to laugh and to make jokes, and so that's what we do.
When can you remember when you started wanting to like write things down that you found funny, or like how did writing start for you?
It started seriously in undergrad. I was a history major and very unhappy with what the major focused on. I just wanted to hear stories of war and great men. And instead, we were learning about Roman sexuality and South American economical history or whatever. And I was just like, where are the bodies? I want to hear, let's roll some people down a temple, kids, their parents, let's go. And I didn't get it. And then I joined a creative writing class with an elective. And then that's when school like meant something. maybe for the first time. I couldn't believe that the assignments were to just tell stories. So I'd get the assignment, I go home, stare at a blank screen, and just wait for my brain to do something. I'm just like, let's go, let's make it terrifying. It's always, I guess for me, it started with scary stories and just small town wickedness. And then humor kind of has always been there because of Grandpa and Dad. And then slowly humor kind of rose to the surface. Anyway, like I guess the sweet spot is something that is scary but also funny. It's the dream to achieve that balance. Um, so, and I also remember I wrote a story in fourth grade that I thought was hilarious, and it was about a bunch of kids who were going around the world eating, and that was the whole point. And they like ate until they exploded, and I think I was ahead of my time because no one thought it was awesome except me, and I was very upset.
You guys do everything with violence in your family, and so when you started writing, did you also did that inspire and how you wrote, like your regimen of how when you wrote and how many times a day and
Yeah, I had like I think it was like three bits of advice that from professors. I said, do I have it? Do I have the gift? And one professor is like, I've seen a lot of students, he said, and a lot of them have talent, but very few of them just keep with it and keep writing. And so like a great promise dropped into my heart in that moment. I'm like, I am never, ever going to stop. I don't care if I'm not good. I'm going to do this until I'm dead. And then another professor, I asked the same question, and he said something about like Mark Twain wrote every day. And so another promise dropped into my heart. I'm like going to write every single day, no matter what, birthdays, Christmas, funeral, doesn't matter. I'm going to write every day. And so I, I think I think I've been able to pull it off for, I don't know, it's like 20 years now. Even if it was just like a couple lines written by flashlight, in a tent on the side of a mountain, like writing every day has happened. And so I guess the most insane it got, I had my brother and father built me sort of a flip top desk in a closet so I could get in there and kind of like lock myself in like a fighter pilot. And, and I drew all over the walls like monsters and everything. And so I would have a beginning time that I would write on the desk and an ending time. And pretty soon the desk was just covered in numbers. And then I also would punish myself. So if I like wrote for 45 minutes and it was supposed to be an hour and a half and I didn't complete that session, I would have to complete it by the end of the day. And if I didn't, it would go into sort of a deficit folder, and I would have to make up the time by the end of the week, to the point where at times I would have hours and hours of writing. And I think one time I had to write for 3 hours in a row, and my poor little hands were claws by the end of it. And I was just lying on the floor with claw hands crying because I couldn't get to the end of my 3 hour session. So yeah. And also while I was writing in that room, I like kind of braced my feet on the sheetrock, the drywall or whatever underneath the desk until my feet kicked through the wall out into the bedroom. And so you'd see under the desk like this great hole in the wall and like feet sticking through, because that's what it takes.
Well, that is violent. When did you start to blend your like fiction with like one and the stories that you heard into your own kind of creative nonfiction voice?
I think it started, I got a job at a college, and it was a 1 year appointment. And I remember my mentor from grad school said, like, if you've got to make an impression, you have to make them remember you, do something big so that the 1 year appointment will turn into something longer. And so at the school I went to in Louisiana, they had something called the Thursday night reading series. I started something called the Geneva reading series. That's the name of my school, Geneva. And I wrote something. The first night I wrote something about, I guess there was another guy on campus who was also named Dan Williams, and it made me extremely angry because I would get his emails and he would get mine. And so I wrote a piece about like how I am the Daniel Williams. No, like, make no question about it. I'm the one. Forget about this other one. And it ended up being like really funny, and people liked it. And so I just started to lean into the creative nonfiction humor, and found that I could be funny. I could tell stories and be funny at the same time, even be scary and funny at the same time. And so it's been like 11 years now that we do. It's called GRS, the Geneva Reading Series, on campus. It used to be 4 times a year. Now it's once a semester. But anyway, that's where I found that voice. And then it kind of went into the blog on Medium, and I haven't stopped since. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone else who wants to tell their stories, like who want to recall their childhood and put it down on paper?
Build a flip top desk in a closet and kick your feet through the wall. Write every single day and never stop. Write on your birthday, on Christmas, and even on funeral days. But I guess but seriously, writing every day is extremely important because it gets you to break free from writing when you feel like it. If you only write when you feel like it, then eventually you realize that you write once or twice a week, if that, and maybe once or twice a week becomes once or twice a month. And then this wonderful talent that you have, you never really did anything with it because you only wrote when you felt like it. So break through that barrier. And I think when you break through the writing when you feel like it barrier, you develop a certain kind of muscle that will also help you break through writer's block to the point where you don't believe in it anymore. You just write every day, no matter what, and that just becomes a part of your life's momentum that you can't stop. And I guess it sounds like obsession, but that's not always a bad thing.
What about memory? Like, do you have any advice on like bringing up memories and like kind of like finding what to write about when it comes to childhood or, even the past?
I think so. Manette Ansay, she was an Oprah Book Club winner. She wrote, what's it called? Limbo, a memoir that I really liked. And she said that she wrote to remember. And I found that to be true, that as you're writing something that stirs up memories that you haven't been able to look at for just through normal thinking, but writing is a different kind of thinking that, I don't know, it just sort of it reaches deeper into your mind, and you can pull up things you're like, I can't believe I remembered that. And then you remember many details about an event just from writing. So there's that, but there's also I think you build sort of like a memory tree, and you just write down, for example, like maybe you have memories surrounding a school you went to. For me, it was oops. For me, it was Palermo Consolidated School. And so I would be like, okay, what do I remember from that? One story might be my buddy who projectile vomited across the classroom. And then the janitor came in with a vacuum cleaner, and he called it the Gucker Sucker. And he cleaned up that. And I remember that tube of vomit. It was like perfect. It was like a water fountain. It was so pristine. So that might be one story. I'm like, okay. And then I remember another one. I was at that same kid's house playing computer games. And when it was my turn, I started doing really, really well until he punched me in the nuts. I'm like, I remember that. And that same kid, like, I remember he got on this little scooter in gym class, and the scooter flipped out from underneath him, and he cracked his head open on the gym floor. And I'd never heard that before, that you can actually crack your head open. And that's something that he did. And I always admired him for that. But they'll be like, okay, there are 15 stories about this one kid, and that's just a kid. And then one place in school I was there for a handful of years. And then everywhere all through your life, you can sort of watch this tree send down roots and send out branches, grabbing more and more memories that you can uncover through writing.
Are there any, do you have a favorite story from the podcast this last season, or like a favorite, moment that that you wrote about?
I think I like the final story, which was the near death experience on the Atlantic, where me and my buddy we crossed a breakwater out to Richmond Island, and right that's in Cape Elizabeth, Maine. And on the way back, the breakwater, the tide had come in and covered half our little land bridge, and so we swam, but the water was 50 degrees, so hypothermia set in, and I started sinking. And I think that's the closest to death I've ever been, to the point where I cried out to God like I was in the Old Testament, and just I knew for a second, I knew, oh, I'm gonna die, and I just I couldn't believe it, that it was over, and my whole life just felt really really small because it no longer had a future, and I was too afraid to think about the past, and so it just became this tiny little thing, this very small life, a little kernel of life in the present, something definitely small enough to die,
Hmm.
and then I touched sand somehow, and I made it to shore. And then my life started to unfold as I thought, and I started to have a future again and started to remember my past. And so, and that one, I think it's funny all the way through. We found a sheep that on the island, a sheep who had been cut in half, like bitten in half by a wolf. And we called the island Half Sheep Island after that. And like he became like our little mascot, the half sheep, and he looks so cute in his bowl of blood out in the meadow. But then also like very serious things. I almost died, and so
Mhm.
that ends up being a story that I really liked.
Is there anything from that story, that time on the island, that you didn't put in the let me ask again so you can cut it out. Is there anything that happened during that story that you didn't tell us on the blog?
I'm profoundly afraid of ticks. And this was even before I knew about Lyme disease. I just thought that they were awful, and that island was covered in them. There was a caretaker of the island who lived out there, the greatest job on earth. But she said the island was covered in ticks, and so she had like 20 on her face or whatever, and so it was just horrifying. And so I just didn't find the room to like let ticks dominate the story like they have dominated my life.
That's probably good. Um, are there any stories you're not ready to tell? Like you don't want to tell yet? I guess you can't tell us if you're not ready to tell us, but
Yeah, no, I think there are some that I've tried to write them before, and they always seem to be stories of profound cruelty on my part. Something I did when I was a kid that is just so bad that I feel like I must have been insane, and I'm like, why did I do that? That was so stupid, or that was so mean, and I found that like I don't know, I haven't yet been able to. Well, I guess what I'm afraid of is that people will be like, you're the devil, and then just sort of be done with me. And I'm like, but I was a kid, I didn't know what I was doing.
mm,
I was filled to the top with ignorance and anger, and I'm just afraid that like people, I won't be able to make myself understandable. Like for example, there was a story, and this one, like this makes it in, but I we had a relative visiting the house, and I'd never seen this person before, but for some reason I walked up to them, and I don't know what he was to me, second, third, something, and I spit in his face. He was just some random man like who just showed up at the house, and I spit on him. Like what the heck was that? Like what was I thinking? It just to me just seemed like a moment of madness. And I have other like madness moments that like I'm just working on gaining the ability to be able to tell them in such a way that uh, that I won't be, I don't know, just run out of town.
well, we're all a little mad when we're kids, aren't we?
Truth.
And so tell us about misbehaving in Maine, the book.
So I collected a lot of main stories, childhood stories, and assembled them into a book. And it sort of the arc of the book is my relationship with my brother, a relationship that just moved from war to war to eventual, there's just a kind of peace. And so you'll just find this, it's a book about battling brothers, a kind of psychological warfare um, journal, but also like along the way, along the road of trying to figure out how to be a middle child, a younger brother. There's also a lot of just kind of rabbit trails of insanity that take place. Fully illustrated, have drawings all through the thing, and it should be coming out in like mid-June, maybe early July. The publisher is Falls City Press, one word, fallscitypress.com, and you can find Misbehaving in Maine, 30 Half-Learned Lessons. That's the book.
Well, thanks. For bleh. Thank you for telling us about that, and I think everybody will be excited to have all your stories together in one place. Can you give us a sneak peek into what we might find in season 3 of the podcast?
I'm going to write all those stories that should get me incarcerated. That's what's up.
Uh-oh. Sounds like we should stay tuned. This concludes our Q&A, and if you have any questions you'd like to ask Dan, have him answer, or advice you want on writing, let us know in the comments on Spotify, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. Friends and neighbors, this has been Misbehaving in Maine. See you next time, and remember, you may be wicked, you may be weird, but you're not alone. The end.
Yay. Oh, that was
terrible.
It sucked.
I kept flipping all over my words.
Me too.
Oh, you did good.